we'll kick this thing off. Do we need to broadcast to do that?
No, I just started the stream now. I'll start the broadcast and hit record in just a second.
Okay.
Okay, we are broadcasting and recording.
Oh, you know what, Derek? I'm not able to share my screen as a co-host. Give me the host rights and then I'll just re-grant you as co-host then.
Okay, all set.
All right, hold on. There we go. Yes, I agree with what Mr. Delaker said. Nothing seems to be easy. So here we go. All right, we're sharing a screen and we're ready to go. Derek, are you still able to promote them to panelists?
Probably not, Troy, because I cannot.
All
So
right.
Derek probably can't. I can remove them.
No, I do have the ability. I just promoted Aileen now.
Okay.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Are we ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like to call the special board meeting to order for July 22nd, 2020. Please join me with opening exercises, a pledge to the flag, followed by a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Mrs. Portinho, will you please call the roll?
John Cassiano,
Here.
Willard Delaker,
Here.
Joseph Batzinger,
Present.
Todd Hernandez,
Here.
Todd Leiser,
Here.
Marcy Pazinski,
Here.
Alan Rex,
Here.
Rachel Shuffler,
Here.
James Warfel.
Here.
Thank you. And at this time, I would ask the board if we could move item 2.01 on the agenda, which is the announcement of the meeting of this, of the business of this meeting, just before the welcome and courtesy of the floor. And with that request, I would ask for approval of agenda.
Motion to approve, Rex.
Second, Lizer.
Second, Fatzinger.
Motion by Mr. Rex, second by Mr. Weiser. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? And motion carried. Well, welcome everyone to this meeting tonight. This is a special meeting. We don't normally meet in July to take any action, but we have this meeting tonight to cover the health and safety plan that has been in the making for the last several months. The reason we're doing it on Zoom instead of in person is because we are currently limited to 25 people in attendance in the boardroom, and that would include the board and the administrators. So we can have many more people present for this meeting via Zoom rather than in person. I think we'd all rather have it in person, but those are the restrictions that we're living by. We also have streaming on YouTube for anyone who would like to view this meeting, and that is streaming right now. So with that, I would offer at this time courtesy of the floor, and the board will recognize any resident of the district, any employee of the district, or anyone having a legitimate interest in a contemplated action of the board this evening. And yes, it is complicated. Participants will request to be heard, and Dr. Sosnovic will stream them so that you can state your comment to the board. Please also include your name and address when you address the board. And Dr. Sosnovic, I would turn this over to you to see if there are anybody in the queue to address the board at this time.
At this moment in time, Mr. Delacour, there is no one raising their hand.
Okay, I'll give it a couple more seconds here and see if somebody wants to open it up for public comment. Still none?
Still none, sir.
Okay, let's move to the business at hand, and that is 2.02 on the agenda, the health and safety plan. And Mrs. Holman, I would turn it over to you to start us off on this review.
Certainly, Mr. Delacour, thank you. I am proud and excited tonight to share the results of a lot of hard work from our entire team on our reopening health and safety plan. Just a couple thank yous before we go ahead and get started. A huge thank you to our administrative team, the majority of which, if not all, are on tonight for their dedication and planning. Certainly a lot of hard work, as I mentioned, over the last few weeks with very evolving advice and guidance. And they remain thoughtful as well as educationally focused to be able to come up with the plan that you see this evening. Our teachers certainly have had, we've talked to them as late as this week, and thank you for their input, their dedication, and their communication, as well as their support of our students and support that they will give, I'm sure, throughout the remainder of the coming year. Our support staff, all of their back to school planning, from our secretarial staff to our custodians prepping our buildings to be able to welcome our students and our staff back. And I think it is 23 days now. So we are T-minus 23 days. I'd like to talk a little bit about the plan, and then I will certainly turn it over to Dr. Sosnovic. The introduction is this really is a plan that you will see that will cover a variety of scenarios. And so the direction we are asking for tonight is approval of this framework. It will give us, and particularly me as superintendent, the authority to be able to select the best option at the time. And so it's really a framework, and you will see it covers a variety of different colored phases aligned with the governor's reopening plan, and it gives us the authority to select the best option at the time. We are asking for your approval tonight to be able to submit it to PDE as the framework that we'll use for what will be the majority of the 2021 school year. Dr. Sosnovic will present an overview of the plan tonight. As you see on your agenda, there are a number of items. The first one is really the full document. So we are required to put together a full health and safety plan document that is listed on your board agenda. The presentation that Dr. Sosnovic will go over tonight is also on the board agenda. The video preview for parents that I did and launched to parents on Friday, which is a shortened version of the presentation that you'll see this evening, as well as the form that PDE requires for submission to guarantee that regardless of the option we select throughout the year, we are required to meet the 180 school days, 900 minutes, and 990 minutes at the high school. Through all of our stakeholder groups, and Dr. Sosnovic will go over the majority of the stakeholder groups, he has gotten very good at this presentation in terms of flow, and so I think he has it about 45 minutes or so, and so I will hand it over to Dr. Sosnovic to go through the plan, and certainly will be available for any questions when he is completed. Dr. Sosnovic.
Thank you, Mrs. Holman. I don't know about pretty good, but I'll do my best to get through this. So hello, for those that don't know me, my name is Troy Sosnovic. I'm the Assistant Superintendent at Northwestern Lehigh. Tonight I will provide an overview of the major components of the Northwestern Lehigh reopening health and safety plan for the start of the 2021 school year. This presentation will take about 45 minutes to get through, and I'm going to ask you to hold your questions to the end. As Mrs. Holman mentioned at the conclusion of this presentation, we're seeking board approval of this framework per requirement of PDE. This plan represents the instructional models and procedures that we will be instituting so that we can continue to provide our students education during this challenging time. Our intent was to inform families on what specific instructional model or models we plan to return to this fall. But the July 16th release of the public health guidance for schools has altered that. It's really important to highlight that the science, public health conditions, as well as the state orders and guidance surrounding COVID-19 are constantly evolving. For example, last month alone, we've gone from a county going green and seeing restrictions relax to our current situation of universal face coverings, travel quarantines from states, and targeted mitigation efforts by the governor. Because so much has changed since the last time we gathered input from families, we decided to send out another survey this past Friday to collect input. We are pleased that our plan is very much aligned with the recent released public health guidance for schools, but we still felt it important to reconnect with our health partners this week and see what develops over the next 2 weeks prior to deciding on what instructional model or models the administration will ultimately be deciding to go with. We will be providing an additional update to you on August 3rd, so be on the lookout for communication from us. Before we review the details of the plan, I want to take a moment and provide some comfort in the fact that we're not alone in this. This is not a challenge just facing our community. Reopening schools this fall is a national challenge facing all educational institutions, both K-12 and higher ed. We're all working to design plans that are in the best interest of our school communities. We've been meeting with our counterparts in other districts throughout the county, as well as the state level on a weekly and sometimes daily basis. Some of the meetings include discussions with Secretary Rivera himself, superintendent's meetings. We participate in the CLU task force for reopening that provided opportunities for our district administrators to have focused discussions with job-alike members. We have also been participating in the County Emergency Preparedness Committee that gave us direct access to Lehigh County Emergency Management and the Department of Health data and resources. Finally, please know the plan I'm about to review is specific to the Northwestern Lehigh School District. Yes, it will look different from other districts across the county and state because this plan was created using our local data and tailored specifically to maximize our available resources in both people and facilities. All right, so with all that said, some of you may be wondering what exactly is a health and safety plan? Well, on June 3rd, PDE issued a mandate across the state that districts had to create a plan that would serve as local guidelines for the reopening of schools in the fall. The plan must be tailored to the unique needs of each school entity, created in consultation with local health agencies, aligned with Governor Wolf's process for reopening, reviewed with our local child care facilities, approved by our school board, and eventually submitted to PDE. Beyond these requirements, each district had to designate a pandemic coordinator. I'm going to say I've been called many things in my life, but I never would have guessed I would hold the title of pandemic coordinator. The role I assume primarily is responsible for facilitating our local planning process, monitoring implementation of our plan, as well as local health data to determine if adjustments are needed throughout the school year. This plan was not designed in isolation, but rather from a team of stakeholders comprised of a broad cross-section of individuals that provided unique perspectives and knowledge expertise in various areas. Our team consisted of medical professionals, for example, Lehigh Valley Health Network, Northwestern Medical Center. We had several parents in the district, one of them being an infectious disease doctor, as well as a cardiologist. Intimately involved was the Department of Health, as well as our Lehigh County Emergency Management. We had school board representative in Dr. Warfel, our school nurses, students, parents, teachers, employees, and last but certainly not least, our district administrators. I would like to take a moment and publicly recognize and thank LVHN because they have been instrumental in helping us navigate through and develop procedures specifically related to this pandemic. We as an administrative team recognized early on, we are not medical experts. Our expertise is in the education of students. It was important for us to rely on our partnerships with LVHN and other medical professionals in our community to help guide the design of this plan. As you will see, our plan bears the LVHN Coordinated Health logo because it has been fully endorsed by them. Finally, I want to thank more specifically Dr. Pelosi because he has been an invaluable asset to us in our community. At the onset, we worked with LVHN to define key strategies that served as a foundation of our planning efforts. The first 4 strategies were identical to the ones that LVHN used in their design of their own health and safety plan. They are social distancing practices to the greatest extent feasible and appropriate, sanitizing high-touch areas, frequent and effective hand hygiene, and avoiding touching the face. Recognizing early on that much will be different in terms of procedures and practices for our students, families, employees, we added a 5th strategy focused on training. As you will see in the plan, there are many processes, procedures, and expectations that will need to be reinforced throughout the school year. Our development approach was first and foremost focused on the safe return of students and employees. Please know that this was at the forefront of all of our planning efforts. It was important for us to provide an environment that is conducive to teaching and learning, where our students can be engaged with our highly qualified teachers as much as possible. Providing transparency to our school community was something we felt to be paramount. This was the main reason we elected to forego PDE's template and design our own that provided the level of granularity for families to know exactly what they could expect come this fall. The other reason we elected not to use the PDE template was that we needed to design a plan to act as a living document. As I mentioned earlier, the situation we find ourselves in changes day to day. So we needed a plan that acted as a framework that afforded us the flexibility and nimbleness needed for us to respond quickly and appropriately. Leveraging our relationships with our health partners and medical professionals was critical, as well as relying on credible sources, information sources, such as the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, the Department of Health, and American Academy of Pediatrics. Finally, collecting and considering stakeholder feedback in addition to leveraging data to drive decisions were key elements we use and continue to use as we progress forward. The use of data to drive decisions is a cornerstone of our efforts. Having access to data ranging from a global level to as granular as a zip code allows us to design a plan that's specific to our community. Beyond the data sources provided by health organizations, we gathered input from our families and staff. Surveys were sent out in June to both groups. And as I mentioned, we recently sent another survey out to our families this past Friday. Highlights of the first two surveys are listed on the screen. 90% of our families want schools to reopen. 90% of our families feel comfortable sending their students to school with reasonable health and safety protocols in place. 84% of our educational staff are comfortable coming back with the same reasonable and health safety protocols in place. 93% of families are able to provide a bag lunch each day if we need them to. Some families wanted a blended option. 183 students indicated as such. Some families wanted completely online option for their student, such as selecting online with Northwestern Teachers or our digital academy, and 100 students indicated that. Approximately 40% of our families responded that healthcare would be an issue if we ended up in a blended or online model. It's important to recognize this as a hardship. 42% of our families are able to provide transportation to and from school. When you review the plan, you will see that it is very comprehensive and provides details to over 20 instructional, operational, and health areas. Each section is aligned to Governor Wolf's reopening phase, as well as the Department of Health's designation for community spread. Contained within each phase are action steps and links to procedures that we will be following. All right, up to this point in the presentation, I provided the background information and context of our plan and our overall development approach. As I progress with the presentation, I will not be reviewing all 38 pages of the plan, but rather bringing attention to the main focus areas our school community is most interested in. If someone wishes to read through the entire plan, it's available on this agenda item, as well as our website. The first area I will review is our instructional models. On your screen are the instructional models we intend to institute during each of the phases. If we are in red, our intention is to deliver instruction online with Northwestern Teachers similar to the end of last year. However, it will be in a manner that provides much more rigor and structure than in the spring to adhere to the state's instructional time requirements that Mrs. Holman previously mentioned. In yellow and green, we plan to offer one of the following choices, which I will better describe on the next slide. Our preferred model is the traditional setting because of all the additional benefits beyond education children receive when they are physically present in our classes. There is no question that schools are fundamental to child development and well-being and provide children and adolescents with academic instruction, social and emotional skills, safety, reliable nutrition, physical, speech, and mental health therapy, and opportunities for physical activity, among many other benefits. School is much more than just showing up and learning math and English. At Northwestern, we take pride in focusing on the whole child. And that's why we prefer our students to be here with us and our wonderful educators. However, we recognize that parents have a choice. And so, as always, a family has the ability to choose our digital academy, which has been in place for over a decade, or homeschool their child themselves. This slide goes into more detail about each instructional model we are planning for the next year. In traditional, students' instruction will be delivered at school 5 days a week in learning settings and classrooms that adhere to social distancing practices to the maximum extent feasible and appropriate. This will be offered in yellow and green phases. In red, yellow, and green, an option we might deploy is online instruction with Northwestern Teachers. This will be delivered online through self-paced modules or live instruction by Northwestern Lehigh teachers. The blended model in yellow and green is something we would deploy if we are forced into a greater density lowering environment. As an example, students would be split into cohorts and instruction would be delivered to them both online and in a traditional setting on alternating days. This is an example of a blended model. This is not the final blended model. This is just an example for purposes of sharing. So students would be broken up into cohort A's and B, and A and B by last name / household name. So for example, students with the last name A through K will be in school Monday and Tuesday, and then get their instruction online Thursday and Friday. The opposite end, the L's and Z's, would be online Monday and Tuesday, and then in school Thursday and Friday. Wednesdays, all students would have online instruction. Families can expect one or more of these models for the fall of 2020. It is important to note that we may very well alternate in between these options based upon local health data in addition to issued state and federal orders. This slide provides two choices for parents if the options I described previously are not what's in the best interest for their family. Families can enroll their child in our digital academy, which is a comprehensive cyber option for students in grades K through 12. Students that participate in our digital academy are provided a Northwestern report card, transcript, have access to our library, guidance services, and LCTI Institute. Most importantly, they are awarded a Northwestern Lehigh High School diploma. The other option is that a parent could homeschool their child. On the slide are links that will give families more information about each program. Of all the items across the nation schools have been struggling with, transportation is one of our greatest logistical challenges. We believe that if we can get students to our buildings, we have the ability to provide them an environment that balances health and safety with education. We are a mass transportation provider. The majority of our fleet are 78 passenger buses. Social distancing guidelines impose a challenge for us to transport students across our 110 square miles of this district. LVHN really helped us think through this section by having us focus on three key mitigation strategies: face covering, social distance, and ventilation. The way LVHN recommended us to approach this challenge and others was to increase the other two mitigation strategies when the third is not as great. For example, since we are in green, we are seating 2 students per seat. Therefore, the optimal social distancing is not available, so we will need to increase ventilation and require face coverings. To emphasize, all students that will be transported by Northwestern will be required to wear face coverings. This is very much in line with the universal face covering order as well as the health guidance that was issued last Thursday. The other point to highlight on this slide is that if we are in a state of influx where we are going back and forth from yellow to green, at the onset of the yellow phase, parents and guardians will need to transport their child. However, we recognize that for a myriad of reasons, transportation is a vital service to our families. So if it's an extended yellow phase, we may institute community stops whereby parents will bring their child to a defined area in the community where we can shuttle them back and forth and maintain a social distancing of 1 child per seat. Later on in this presentation, I will talk about how we need parents' help with implementing this plan. And this is one of those sections. If you could transport your child to and from school each day, we are asking you to please do so. It would create a natural benefit of reduced population on our buses and allow for us to continue services to those families that truly need it. Our classroom guidelines will be consistent in both yellow and green, whereby we are limiting the number of individuals in classrooms and other spaces to maximize social distancing. We'll be instituting class schedules that limit the number of people during transitions and allow students and staff to be as static as possible. We will be recommending our teachers, whenever possible, to hold classes in gyms, auditoriums, and other large spaces, as well as outdoors. We're going to be limiting interactions between students and limiting the sharing of supplies and materials. We will be providing additional supplies at classrooms to minimize sharing of supplies, as well as sanitizing supplies that have to be shared. In green, we will consider and postpone field trips and large group assemblies until social distancing allow participation without accommodations. But to point out, in yellow, class field trips will be, and large group assemblies will be canceled. All right, the use of face coverings. If transportation is one of the most logistical challenges, I'm going to be very honest, this is probably the most sensitive. I will say that because our community, like our nation, is made up of individuals that feel either strongly for or against the use of face coverings. Regardless of what side the issue you are on, you must understand that Northwestern must follow all laws and orders issued by either the federal or state government. Effective July 1st, the Department of Health put in place the Universal Face Covering Order, mandating the use of face coverings both indoors and outdoors throughout the Commonwealth, and we have to ensure our plan reflects that order. As a result, staff and students must have face coverings in their possession to be utilized as instructed, including if an individual becomes symptomatic or if the minimum social distancing cannot be maintained. We want to let everyone know we will be accepting written medical exemptions for those individuals that cannot wear a face covering. For students, I want to emphasize that our intention is to establish creative solutions that allow students to remove face coverings as much as possible while still adhering to the social distancing practices. Until such time the order is lifted, face coverings will be required for students at Northwestern. However, regardless of the order, there will be specific times when face coverings will be required. As you can see, transportation, during transitions, food service line, and when a child exhibits COVID-related symptoms are times when face coverings will be required regardless of phase or this order. This is because in these environments, we have less control and ability to reinforce our social distancing standards. When our students are in our classroom under the direction of our teachers, we have a greater ability to maintain social distancing through seating layouts and classroom management techniques. The bottom line is if we want our kids to physically go back to school and resume some sort of sense of normalcy, we all need to do our part in following the universal face covering order, as well as teaching our kids to be respectful of others' opinions and remind them that they are members of a greater school community. For employees, face coverings will be required at all times as defined in the universal face covering order, as I mentioned. Social distancing is embedded throughout our entire plan. However, we did create a section that overcomes or that covers some of the elements that are not clearly apparent. I will say social distancing is an area that even the health organizations can't seem to come to terms on. For example, the WHO, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and even local health departments in our state have issued recommendations that define social distancing as being no less than 3 feet. On the other hand, you have the CDC suggesting 6 feet as their recommendation. What all these organizations have in common is that they are offering recommendations, but not mandates, meaning no one is providing school districts with clear direction, but rather offering recommendations with that end with, and I quote, "to the maximum extent feasible." Northwestern's approach to social distancing is to strive for 6 feet, but no less than 3, which is aligned with the organizations I mentioned above and continues to be supported by LVHN as recently as yesterday. That level of distancing, along with the use of face coverings, is so critical for us if we wish to open in a traditional model. Going into more detail, our social distancing practices in our classrooms will be to organize desks facing all in the same direction, limit the mixing between groups and group work, hold classes in those larger areas like I mentioned, and outfit our offices and other non-instructional areas to have barriers or other social distancing practices. With regard to breakfast and lunch, we will continue our grab-and-go breakfast in our elementary schools. We'll utilize our cafeterias for students to retrieve prepackaged meals and eat lunch. Each building has identified overflow rooms where students will eat so we can accommodate the social distancing requirements. Limited menu items will be developed, which all items to be offered will be prepackaged. We're not going to offer a salad bar. All a la carte items, as I mentioned, and bottled items must be prepackaged. We plan to institute a cashless payment system. Students will be required to sanitize their hands prior to and after eating. And we are suspending the birthday bag program. Movements, transitions in the hallways. Our goal is to, at an elementary level, is to have students remain in the homeroom with teachers and move teachers to the classrooms to the maximum extent practical. Traffic patterns to reduce traffic, the amount of traffic in hallways at one time are being established. Special area teachers, for example, will come to the classroom versus students going to that special area classroom when we are in a yellow phase. Our secondary principals are also designing traffic patterns that will be promoting social distancing during transitions. And in the yellow phase, we are going to take a more stringent stance on congregation of students before, after, and during school hours. Recess, physical education, all of these, as you will see, are aligned with the already board-approved Return to Sport COVID-19 Health and Safety Plan, better known as our athletic plan. Established practices contained in this section are consistent with the CDC considerations for youth sports. Hand washing is essential prior to and after ending any PE or recess activity. As you will see, we will focus in yellow on strength, individual skill and conditioning activities. We will not be sharing equipment. Locker rooms will be closed. And in green, we will start to reintroduce team sports with still hand sanitizing equipment after each use. We will be utilizing our playground equipment. Locker rooms may be utilized if we can design a plan that adheres to social distancing. But even with those school or those team sports introduced, we will be discouraging any unnecessary contact between students and creating distance between players whenever possible. Music, class, instrumental lessons, and chorus. All of these will follow the National Federation of State High Schools, the National Association for Music Education, and the National Association of Music Merchants guidelines. We will be minimizing lesson sizes to the greatest extent possible. We will not be sharing materials or equipment for larger instrumental or for instrumental large groups or band rehearsals. We will be looking to utilize larger areas such as the auditorium and outdoors. We will be canceling them if we go into yellow. We potentially may be canceling large group performances, even in green, but you could guarantee we will be canceling that large group performances if we are in yellow. With regard to the high school band and chorus, we will follow the NFHS guidelines as defined in our extracurricular plan. Our plan has a link to it that has an extracurricular health and safety plan, which is very much in line with our approved athletic plan. Essentially, band, chorus, drama activities, the advisors in those groups must follow the guidelines issued by their respective associations and implement the guidelines to the greatest extent possible. The use of in order to, to limit the potential of outside exposure and maintain a greater sanitized environment, we are restricting the use of our facility to only group 1 and 2. Group 3 and 4, which are civic and community organizations, as well as commercial or outer district groups, will still be permitted to, or not permitted to use our facilities, even in green. Our approach to cleaning and sanitizing is aligned directly with CDC recommendations. We will allow for water fountains that are the touchless bottle fillers or touchless hydration stations. Similar to gym, lockers are restricted in the hallways. However, we might consider them in green if we could come up with an idea with regard to maintaining social distancing. Our nurses' suite/separation rooms will be sanitized by our Halo machines each night, which goes above and beyond the recommendations that we must follow. Support from our families and maintaining two-way communication between the district and the home is critical to the success of this plan. At no other point will the relationship between the home and school be so important. We've developed a webpage to centralize communications and resources for families. We are committed to providing ongoing communications and collaborations with regard to our local health and safety plan, our district-specific protocols, and best practices with regard to safe hygiene at home. We have created Northwestern branded signs, bookmarks, screening cards, provide to families to help reinforce our practices at home. Prior to the return to school, we are asking families to please review these protocols with their children. Practice and reinforcement of good prevention hygienes at home. Please do not send your child to school if he or she is sick. And we're asking all families to be prepared if your child needs to stay home. Please know our procedures call for sending any student home that exhibits symptoms as quickly as possible. Therefore, ensuring the emergency contact information the district has on file is paramount. Here's an example of one of the district branded signs that will serve as a reminder for all of us as we progress forward. You will see on the right hand of this sign, "We need your help." This is directed directly to parents and guardians and comes from the bottom of our heart. We truly need your help next year. We need your help in following the health and safety guidelines we put out. We need your help in taking your child's temperature and keeping him or her home if he or she exhibits symptoms. We need your help in maintaining two-way communication with us regarding your child. And we need your help in transporting your child if you're not able to. Another way parents and guardians will be asked to help is to complete a daily screening of their child each day. Our approach to screening is one of a continuum conducted throughout the day. The continuum of screening for students begins at home. We are asking families to complete a temperature and symptom check prior to sending their child to the bus stop or dropping them off at school. We are emphatic in saying that if your child meets the criteria on our screening tool, please do not send him or her to school and follow the directions on the card. This is an example where we all must be more community-minded and do the right thing. The same goes for employees. Each employee shall complete a symptom check prior to coming to work and are requested not to report if symptoms are apparent. Visual COVID-19 symptoms all employees will be trained in are the appearance of a fever, difficulty in breathing or shortness of breath, or persistent cough, which is frequent or severe enough to catch someone's attention. This is a screenshot of the screening card we made for families. They are 5x7 cards that families could place on their fridge and reference each morning. As you can see, we ask that if your child exhibits anything in column A or B, do not send him or her to school and communicate to us using the email provided. The Continuum of Screening is one of many, many processes and procedures we have developed. Other examples include procedures to working with our nurses, working with our nurses. We've identified and created separation rooms and bays in each school building to separate anyone exhibiting symptoms from the general population. With regard to contact tracing, we've been assigned a direct contact within the Pennsylvania Department of Health to facilitate identifying who would be considered a close contact and provide overall guidance and support with decision-making. This is a point I want to highlight. It's important to recognize that the responsibility of contact tracing falls on the Department of Health and not the Northwestern Lehigh School District. The Department of Health will inform students and employees who they deem as being someone they designate as a close contact. This was reinforced today in our countywide meeting with that Department of Health contact. We will be providing them with information that will help them make informed decisions, and if they request, we will help to facilitate the communication, but only when the Department of Health requests us to do so. I know I reviewed a lot tonight, but above everything else, we want you to know we are all in this together, and together we will get through this. We truly believe that our success is dependent on the continued collaboration and communication between us and our families. Families, please remember, we need your help. What we love about this community is that when things get tough, we pull together and support one another to get through it. We've done it in the past, and we're confident we will do it with this as well. Moving forward, our intention is to review the survey data being gathered right now and provide an update on the plan on August 3rd. Remember, this is a living document. It will be adapted to meet the demands of the ever-changing science, public health conditions, and orders issued by the state. If you have any questions, we ask you to please send them to admin contact, and we'll review them and respond in the quickest manner that we can. Myself, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to present this to you. Mrs. Holman, at this point in time, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Thank you. You did a great job. I think the most important thing that I can reinforce is the stress that Dr. Sosnovic mentioned on, we really do need your help. We need your help as parents and guardians who happen to be listening to this tonight to really reinforce the procedures with your children. We'll send you some reminders between now and then, but certainly as you get them out into other public places, reinforcing some of the procedures that they'll experience during the day, and all the more that you can do that as parents will certainly help us when they come back. Screening them each morning is crucially important. That's why we wanted to make you the 5x7 card, just to have it on your refrigerator or wherever you hang it, because screening children and making sure that children, or adults for that matter, who are sick, don't come to school or don't come to work, is part of our community effort to make sure that we don't contribute to the spread of the virus. We can't do it without your help, and we will certainly be glad to take any questions that the board has this evening.
Yeah, Jen, I have one. Are we going to allow students to bring their backpacks back to school since we're going to be limiting locker use?
Yes, so Mrs. Jadish and Mrs. Stauffenberg are on, and they can certainly mention something if they would like. I think I know the answer for both. Yes, they will be going back. Backpacks will be allowed, even as simple as I mentioned in the video preview I did. Cubbies are probably too close together. I do believe that they will have a plan for students to be able to place things in backpacks, but it has to be more orchestrated than just everyone there at the same time because of how close together they are. So backpacks will be allowed to a certain degree, but different than they were last year. Anybody would like to add to that, you certainly can.
That's correct. We're still working on it, but looking at, obviously, Mrs. Holman said our lockers are very close together. So we are still working on a plan of how to orchestrate that, with coats and things like that, but backpacks most likely will be allowed at the middle school.
I agree with Amy. Jen, you said it very well, but those are definitely the things we need to keep in mind as we move into the winter months, is what we do with any extra clothing that students may have with them during the day.
Other questions from board members?
If there aren't any questions, general question on the presentation, I at this time would like to move into receiving a motion and a second, and then we will get into final questions and comments from the board, unless there is any other administrator who would like to chime in at this time. We could take that if there are any. And I'm not hearing any, so at this time I would entertain a motion to approve the health and safety plan as it was presented.
Motion to approve the plan, Warfel.
Motion by Dr. Warfel.
Cassiano.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Cassiano.
Second by Mr. Cassiano. Now, are there any other further comments or questions about the plan?
Just a comment, Mr. Deliker, an extraordinary challenge to put this plan together. I think it was extraordinarily well met, but it's only the beginning. So the implementation will be equally challenging, if not more so. So best wishes to the administration staff moving forward.
Yes, it was an intense effort with ever-changing goalposts and ever-changing regulations that had to be redone and reconsidered. And also on behalf of the board, thank you to all of the participants, all the stakeholders from the community, our health networks, the parents, students, teachers, administrators, and support staff who assisted in coming up with this plan. It's a very comprehensive plan. I think it has been used by several other districts around the area as a template because it is so comprehensive. And going forward, the plan really addresses all of the different situations that we could be faced with, but under every category of these situations, there is an action plan that is been well thought out and ready to implement. And Dr. Warfel, I agree, the plan creation was a extraordinary effort, but the implementation of this plan is going to be very difficult. I'm kind of disappointed to see that there are only 37 participants that are logged in here tonight. So I don't know, it doesn't look like a lot of the plan with this presentation has reached the parents, and I'm hoping that we're getting some hits on the website for people to review this. I don't know if we have a count on YouTube to see how many people have been watching this, but
Mr. Deliker, the earlier count on YouTube was 105.
oh, excellent. Well, that's a lot better.
I actually had someone just text me and said it was 132 at this.
Good. Well, then there are people in the community who have heard this, and hopefully with all of our means of communications, they can get the word around to have people visit the website and read through this, and also view the video that describes what the plan entails. So with that, are there any other further comments from the board or any further questions from the board?
Yes, Mr. Deliker. Yes, yeah, great plan, great outline. I think that addresses most of the student-related or family-related concerns. I think the one area that didn't really hear much about that we're going to need to address or may need to address is the staffing side of this, the personnel impact. Obviously, a lot of that ends up being personnel-related matters, but administrators and or teachers, staff, bus drivers who may on their own decide not to return to work, or for medical reasons may not need to return to work. So I think there's the plan there is going to be really critical as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Leiser. We did have some staff input in the survey, and I believe Mrs. Matika is on one of the requests from staff so that we could get a head start on that, is if there were staff that certainly were concerned about their health and or needed some sort of accommodation, that they reach out to Luann, and I believe Luann has been working through some of those since that survey and doing so successfully. But
that is great.
It will not be without certainly we are a personnel people business. Sorry, Luann.
No problem. That's correct. I've been working one-on-one with the employees that have concerns or health conditions, those that have been identified as high risk by the CDC, and those that do need the accommodations. The employees have been great to work with. We're hearing their needs, and they're coming up with suggestions and problem solving together. It's been a good partnership so far. I do have concerns about the number of substitutes that may choose not to be available. If you remember, substitutes are truly per diem employees. They choose to work when they want to work. There's no mandated schedule. And many of them come from varied backgrounds, and some of them are retired teachers who may choose not to come back into work at this time. So that's the next challenge. I'm working on a survey to the substitutes to determine their needs as far as training and or their continued interest in subbing.
Luann, are there any concerns about bus driver substitutes as well?
I expect that to be a concern. We are currently recruiting for bus drivers, although, that's always a challenge with the multi-levels of training that's required. So yes, that is another area of concern that we'll be working through.
To that point, is there a contingency point in here that says if we do not have the appropriate busing, for example, that we would cancel all busing? My understanding under current state guidelines is we don't have to provide busing, but once we provide busing, we do have to provide it for all. Is that something we have flexibility around if indeed we don't end up having the capacity to provide that busing?
Jessica Moyer is on. I believe your interpretation is correct. Besides some specialized circumstances with some special education students, right now we are believing we can bus. I suppose if we ended up in a personnel shortage, we could revert to what we are calling Plan Yellow, whereas one of two things would happen. Either we wouldn't offer transportation, which is what we have listed in yellow, and parents would be required to transport, and or we would bus from community stops. So the community stops point allow us to shuttle with less drivers and keep our numbers on the bus lower. So we'd be able to, instead of an hour ride, a parent would pick or drop off at a particular stop within a particular time frame, and we would be able to shuttle back and forth and do so with less drivers. Mr. Oakes is actively working on, I would say, all three of those schedules currently. So that we kind of have them at the ready, not that there won't be some transition time if we move from one mode to another, whether it be instructionally as well as transportation, that we'll still probably need some time to execute some of those, but we need to have some of those schedules ready. And so those are supposedly both options, not ones I would like to consider for the aforementioned reasons Dr. Sosnovic said, although we have a large percentage of about 40% of our parents that said that they could transport. That doesn't mean it's not a hardship for them, and or that we have students that wouldn't be able to attend school if we didn't offer transportation.
I'd like to mention Mrs. Holman too, because so many parents are on, the solution and their help in transporting creates natural other challenges for us. And one of them we recognize will be traffic patterns during drop off and pickup times. And so our chief of police, John, is working with the principals to review that, and we will be making adjustments as needed because we are asking for families to transport and we are asking them for their help. We also want to make it a smooth process, come that time in the fall.
So I noticed that on one of the first slides, the percentage slides, 84% of the staff was okay with things. So that leaves the other 16%. Is that number grown or is it lessened?
That 16%, Mr. Fatzinger, might have been individuals that did not report. So, if you look at it as well, that since we issued that survey, we've touched base with our association leadership as well as provided an opportunity for folks to reach out to Mrs. Matika, in addition to Mrs. Holman and I offering a district-wide faculty meeting for folks to share their concerns or thoughts for the reopening of next year. We do not see that percentage gap from 16 to have grown at this point.
Did that include transportation or just?
It was only educational staff, so our teachers as well as our instructional assistants, those that are directly involved with the education of students, is who was surveyed in that survey.
And if I could just add to that, some of the concerns that were listed on that survey really did focus around face coverings. And since the state has come out with the mandatory order of face coverings, and I believe that has resolved some of the concerns. The other concerns, of course, go around enforcement of students wearing face coverings. But many of the concerns that we heard was the option for face coverings, and that was prior to the mandatory order.
This was probably already addressed, and maybe I missed it because I missed the last meeting, but it is our responsibility to supply all face coverings and equipment.
It is our responsibility to provide all personal protection equipment, yes. And we are doing so as well for our educational staff, as well as obviously our custodial staff who are currently working with their PPE gear, but yes.
With that
PPE
said,
gear varies slightly by role, but yes. Sorry, Trey.
no, I'm sorry, my screen froze for a second. But with that said, we are asking families if they would like to, they can provide their own face covering. So long as that it falls within the definition of the universal face covering order. And so I know a number of our boosters are already putting out Northwestern branded face coverings, and they will be accepted. If a child comes to our bus and does not forgets their face covering, can't find it, whatever, we will have one available to provide to them. And additionally, throughout the day, we will have a supply if something may happen, if it becomes soiled or something along those lines.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, we do have a motion and a second to approve the health and safety plan. And with that, Mrs. Partinio, will you please call the roll?
Sure. John Cassiano,
Aye.
Willard Delaker,
Yes.
Joseph Fatzinger,
Yes.
Todd Hernandez,
Yes.
Todd Leiser,
Yes.
Marcy Pazinski,
Yes.
Alan Rex,
Aye.
Rachel Scheffler,
Yes.
and James Warfel.
Yes.
Thank you. We have unanimous approval for the health and safety plan, and moving forward with the implementation of this plan, with wish all the best to everyone involved with this to make it successful and healthy and safe for our staff and our children. Thank you very much for everybody who has been involved in creating this plan.
Thank you very much to the board for your support. Many of you have echoed our comments. Some of the hard work is going to be involved in the implementing of the plan. We understand there's additional guidance coming out at the end of the month. And so I suspect that there could be some things that change that we give an update, but after this board meeting, we will upload our health and safety plan as well as the instructional PDE instructional template that is on the board agenda to PDE. And should we need to make any updates, we will do so and bring those back to the board. But thank you for your support, and we will get working on the implementation of that in what did I say, T-minus 23 days, I think it is.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving to the next item on the agenda, which I asked Mrs. Holman to put on because of the many comments and concerns from the board about addressing the financial situation that we're into, even before COVID came along, but was exasperated with the reduced revenues that we have projected for next year. And the intent for putting this on the budget on the agenda this evening is just to simply review what we have in existence for the 2021 budget goals that were used to develop our budget last year. And there's a second slide that takes a look at all of the projected real estate tax assumptions that we have projected up through 2025 and 2026. There's a lot of numbers on that sheet, and I don't intend to go over the numbers tonight. This is just information to set up a discussion beginning in August about how we should approach the budget this year. And because we don't have Leslie with us this evening, who is on vacation, well-deserved vacation, what I'd like to do is just take a look at the budget goals that we've had up to this point. And for the last several years, they've been pretty similar. And I just want to look at these things and have you board members take a look at this. If there's any discussion this evening, that's fine. But take a look at these 8 items that we have as boilerplate budget guidelines to give to the administrators to come up with a budget to see if we ought to be changing any of these assumptions or any of these goals. They are pretty motherhood and apple pie assumptions or goals. And I think maybe number 7 is the one that is maybe most affected moving into the coming years. And number 7 on this last year's budget goals read that we continue to identify areas to maximize efficiencies and reduce costs without negatively impacting programs. The programs that we have in existence right now are programs that we all deemed valuable and necessary to the education of our children in our community. And but with the deficits that we've seen in the past several years, that gap that we have between revenues and expenses has to be closed so that we can live more within our means. If there's anyone that would like to comment on where we are with our projected tax assumptions and our budget goals, that would be appropriate this evening. I'd like not to get into specifics at this time because I'd rather have the recommendations from our administrators and our staff as to how we can provide more efficiencies to the delivery of our programs and have them come to the board with proposals for how we can reduce our costs. And, you know, looking at this from a high level, this may not be something we can do in 1 year. The $3 million gap or deficit in our budgeted costs and revenues is a pretty significant number. We also need to look at our fund balance and to determine if the current strategies that we are using with our fund balance are appropriate. And but we need to come back in August with a little bit more of an understanding of where we are and where we need to go, and try to set up a new set of goals for our administrators and staff to try to get started on working on the budget for next year. So with that, I would really like to hear any comments from board members in this area. This is another difficult issue that we have to address as a board, just like the COVID has been for us, and which has taken a lot of the time for the last 3-4 months. But we are moving quickly into the development of next year's budget with a financial situation that needs to be addressed. Or any?
Yeah, my comment, Mr. Deliker, I think you hit on it, right? Number 7. I think if you scroll ahead to the next, I don't know, Troy, are you controlling the screen? If you look at the next page,
Yep.
You know, I think this is a, you know, there's a telling chart here, right? If you look at the orange bars being the estimated expenditures going up every year, you know, we've got to find some way. We know that the only way revenue increases is by increasing taxes in our district, right? That's our primary source of revenue. And so we've got to find some way to start to level off that increase in expenditures, you know, particularly with money leaving the district or leaving the Northwestern school, you know, going to charter school, for example. We just can't afford to have this continued imbalance of expense versus revenue. So yeah, we don't have the answers, but obviously that's something that's got to be really a number one priority for us. And I do think it's going to require us to really think creatively about the structure of the schools. You know, we know we have capacity in some places, Weisenberg Elementary, for instance, you know, while we're feeling pressed in others. You know, we've got class size conversations that need to be had. We've got program needs and wants that need, you know, that need to be had. You know, I think it's going to take some creative thinking on both the cost end and on the revenue side to help us figure out how to balance this over the course. As you said, it's not a 1-year solve. I think this is a 3 to 5 year plan that needs to see the softening of that curve.
And to build off of what Todd just said, you know, my knee-jerk reaction is looking at those 8 goals of ours. I think we can prioritize them, shuffle them a little bit with a 1 through 8. You know, what's the most important to the not that it would be least important, but I think we could sit down and just take these budget goals and reorganize them and to help focus and develop a plan.
In addition to that, Mr. Delacour, I think that the point that people are making, the major concern here is that the ongoing deficit. And I think that number 7 is a pretty vague goal. If in fact, one of our major priorities is to implement strategies that will reduce that deficit and help to eliminate it, I think there should be language specifically committing the budget process to that outcome.
The other reason for getting this on the agenda this evening was to try to make it known to our public and our staff the situation we're in. We just approved our budget for the coming year of 2021, and I have not heard a whole lot from the public. I'm not sure how much awareness the public has about the financial situation that we have at our school, which relative to a lot of other districts is a very good place to be at Northwestern Lehigh. However, as as we all know, that fund balance is being depleted, and we're going to have to do something to bring ourselves to live more within the means that we have without dipping into that fund balance, which has taken decades to build up to where it is today. And we need to, in addition to what Joe and Jim said about prioritizing goals, and Todd, and coming up with strategies, we need to take a look at that fund balance and also try to lay out some strategies for how we can utilize that, but not deplete it before we and get into a situation that we can't handle our budget at all.
Jennifer, are there specific things that would be helpful for us to be able to bring you in August, or would you just like to continue this conversation in our work session? And, I think it was Dr. Warfel who said, or Joe maybe, who said shuffle and reprioritize the goals. Do you want this to come back in the work session to actually do the work of reshuffling those with some additional ideas of what you might want to come back at a later date?
If I can make a comment, Mrs. Holman and Mr. Delacour, to me, the issue at hand is what's the process and the timeline going to be here to get us to a point of discussing actual potential strategies for dealing with the deficit challenge that we're facing. There have been a number that have come up at different times. Some of them came up in the spring as we were wrestling with the current year budget. Many of them are really difficult challenges that require serious discussion. And so to my way of thinking, the sooner we're able to move on and actually get to a point of having a list of possibilities that we can work our way through and decide what is even feasible for us to be thinking about, the more likely we may be in March or April when we start beginning to talk about a preliminary budget to really be someplace. It just seems to me an acute matter to move on to the what ifs and how do we go about resolving them. So I think a timeline and a process for, I think Mr. Delacour had suggested that the administration would bring back some possibilities. I think there should be some way for board members to also specifically contribute ideas to that listing of what might happen.
Is there any appetite with the board to get together for a retreat? Maybe not necessarily a full day like we have in the past, but a half a day retreat to really delve into these goals and to hear what the administrators have in mind up to this point.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I would
That's
be,
all for it.
Then, Mrs. Holman, could we put together one of those meeting survey monkeys or whatever it is that you come up with to pick a date for a meeting? And maybe we could do it one of the Wednesdays between board meetings for a 6 to 9 or something like that. Budget retreat. Is that possible?
Sure. I think the one thing that I am not really sure of is, and Leslie and I had conversation about this before she left, is the appropriate timing of that because of how flux the enrollment is this year. And so the two things that I think we will need some flexibility with as we go through this process is when the enrollments come in and looking at where students go in terms of enrollments in the fall, as well as what our tax income is going to be, and is it what we expected it to be as an impact from COVID, or is it better or worse than we expected it to be? And so all of those things we likely will not have for probably that first meeting, but would shift along the way. But you have certainly general budget assumptions and budget projections on the second page should nothing change. And I just think we'll have to play the other things that are more fluid by ear from there on out. But certainly I can send out a date selector for you.
Well, let's try to do this in, as Jim mentioned, we don't want to wait till March and April to start getting into this discussion. I think if we can do it before the end of this year, even if it's in November, I think that would, October, November, that would give us more of a head start than we've had in previous years to set that high level expectation that needs to be met to bring this expenses under control. So if we could do something for those, maybe October, November. And by that time, we'd have a better feel on our enrollment and perhaps the revenue projections will give us about 3 more months to see what's going to happen.
Okay, will do.
And I understand there's so many variables right now, so many unknowns because of what we're living with. But I think the sooner we start discussing this, the easier it's going to be to come up with a solid plan that we can use to strategize the next 2, 3, 5 years to bring the spending under control. Any other comments from board members about the upcoming budget deliberations? Please think about it. Please think about your specifics. The administration and staff will, I'm sure, they have already, and will bring back some suggestions to us. And then we can put them all together and see if we can come up with a working plan to make this happen.
Mr. Delaker, I just would, once again, I'd like to advocate for sooner rather than later. I understand there's lots of variables that may be unknown, but there are certain ideas that we could begin to at least think about and have on the table. So I would just advocate for sooner rather than later. I think November, October, September would be much better if we could get to this and start having an agenda that we're looking at. So my personal point of view.
Yeah, well, I agree with you too. And I'm trying to, we all know that this implementation plan that for the health and safety plan is going to be a challenge. And I would just like to let the start of the school year settle in a little bit before we add, this is a pretty significant undertaking as well, before we start adding this to the staff to think about. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you for your attention on that. And I think we'll move into courtesy of floor on the agenda at this point. And at this time, Dr. Sosnowiec, if there's anyone who would like to address the board, would you please pipe them in?
Yes, sir. I see Miss Tara Banninger raising her hand. Ms. Banninger, if I pronounce that right, you are muted.
Yes, hi. My name is Tara Banninger. My son will be a freshman at the high school this coming year. I attended the meeting today because I'm currently a breast cancer patient undergoing chemo. So I'm very, very concerned, and I'm possibly considering enrolling my son in the Digital Academy. I want to make sure I enroll him in the Digital Academy if I do that, because I do want to keep the money in the school district. My question is, I have a couple of questions. The first one is, if a family elects to enroll their child in the Digital Academy, but then feels comfortable with how things are going and wants to put them back into in-person classes, will they be able to do that at some point? And the other question is, when it comes to wearing masks in school, is there a plan for how you plan to enforce it and what you plan to do if a child doesn't follow the rules or wear a mask or isn't keeping their distance as they should from the other students?
Mrs. Holman, would you please address the re-enrollment?
Sure, and I actually will do the first one, and unless he would like me to take it, I will throw the second to Dr. Sosnowiec. So the first question that you asked is about the re-enrollment. Yes, however, what I would tell you is a student can move back and forth from the Digital Academy to school. I would tell you at the high school that is particularly challenging because we're on block scheduling. And so what I would tell you is the easiest transition time to do that is at semester breaks, which would mean for you a potential commitment until the end of the semester, which would be January. And I say that because it's like switching schools or switching teachers. Although the curriculum and the standards are in the same order or in the same grade level or subject area, it's like two different teachers teaching it. So the Digital Academy is not taught by Northwestern Lehigh teachers. And so it's just like switching from one classroom to another with two different teachers teaching it. So Mrs. Yadish can certainly add to that, particular to the high school, because we're on a block schedule. That is a little easier if you take classes until the first semester is completed and then would switch over after January when the semester break, because then you are starting in new classes.
Okay, thank you. And my one other question too, I know I had a second question, I'm sorry, just before I forget. How are you guys working with the LCTI students from the high school? Because my son is enrolled in LCTI for his freshman year.
Yeah, before I answer that, I think Mrs. Yadish wanted to comment on your Digital Academy, and then I'll certainly address what I know from Dr. Rushton at LCTI.
Okay, thank you.
I did not want to add anything, Jen. I just wanted to say that's accurate. I actually sent you a message about the same thing. We do prefer at the high school that students transfer from Digital Academy at the marking period change, just because we find it's more beneficial of a transition for the students, that they're kind of getting a clean break into the second half of the course. Jen, did you want me to address LCTI?
Oh, you certainly can.
We are currently, Mrs. Banninger, working with LCTI, trying to mesh our plan. As difficult as a plan this is for us at Northwestern Lehigh, LCTI is working with 9 sending school districts. So I certainly do not envy any of them at all. But we are working directly with them. It is our goal at this time to send students to LCTI as scheduled. while it might look a little bit different, as it will when kids come back to us at the high school, it is still our goal to get them their CTE curriculum as much as possible for this year.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess the other question that I had that I mentioned is how you guys are planning to enforce the mask rules. Like what, do you have a disciplinary way to follow if a student isn't following the rules, isn't complying, or isn't maintaining their social distance with the other children?
I'll grab that, Mrs. Holman, if you want me to.
Sure.
All right, so Mrs. Banninger, first and foremost, we just want to make sure that we're communicating to families that we are following the order as defined. So everyone will be expected to wear face coverings, and that includes students years 2 years and older. Now, there are exceptions as defined in the universal face covering order. And those exceptions are if they have a medical or mental health condition or disability, is documented in what is known as, in accordance with Section 504 or IDEA, which is another term for special education. So right now we are working as an administrative team to design a procedure whereby we can ask questions regarding the use of that face mask, as well as providing, I'm going to say, some substance of teeth of enforcement here at Northwestern. We have recently received legal advice that we are able to do so underneath those documented exceptions, as I just mentioned. So my long answer or short answer of it all is we are aware of it, and we are working on a procedure that will allow us to better enforce it come this fall.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you answering my questions and all the work that you guys have been doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Banninger, and best wishes with your health issues.
Thank you.
Dr. Sosnovic, is there anyone else in the queue?
Yes, Vanessa Fenstermacher. Mrs. Fenstermacher, I'm muting you now. Mrs. Fenstermacher, you have the floor.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Vanessa Fenstermacher, 3924 Whitetail Court, Schnecksville, PA 18078. First and foremost, thank you to the board for all of your hours of volunteerism, and thank you to the administration for all your time and efforts creating this safety plan for our children. It is one of the most comprehensive plans I have seen presented, so thank you both. I have a few questions all pertaining to the same category. How will teaching in the fall be different than it was presented in the spring if we go virtual?
I can certainly address that. It'll vary slightly by level. One of the next tasks that the board will have is in the spring, we had to board approve what was called the Continuity of Education Plan. And the Continuity of Education Plan at the time that was submitted to PDE was what the remainder of the school year looked like. And so that detailed schedules, it detailed grading, it detailed expectations for students as well as teachers. One of the things that we asked our parents as well as our teachers on the surveys, we didn't include it in tonight's presentation, it was about the virtual learning. And we got a lot of feedback from parents and recognized from parents and teachers' perspectives the education that we offer in terms of the time as well as the content needs to be more robust. So my comment when I originally rolled out the slides were it would be a more robust version of what was offered in the spring. It will still certainly be taught by Northwestern Lehigh instructors. Should we end up in a remote model in red or for some other locally or federal state dictated reason, we will be bringing back a revised continuity of education plan because we recognize we need to make changes to the schedule. For example, one of the things that the board approved earlier this evening, and you might have heard me mention, was PDE is continuing regardless of mode to require 180 school days as well as the hours of instruction at 900 hours or 990 hours depending on your level. And so the schedule we originally put out in the spring was a half-day program with office hours in the afternoon essentially. And in the fall, we would need to increase the time of courses in those schedules. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean live instruction the entire time, but it would be content with a teacher that was either teacher directed, or it would be live instruction or some combination thereof. We also recognize the need to make some changes for our grading as well as our teacher and student expectations. And so after we got through some of the planning of this, that's our next task, to do some revisions to our continuity of education plan, which will require board approval and will describe what will happen should we end up online and in a remote model.
Thank you. Can you elaborate? You mentioned live teaching. Will the virtual learning, with it live, will the teachers be from within the classroom with their materials and supplies?
I think this depends. So Dr. Sosnova can certainly address this. One of the things we're currently working through is for those that might need the option or want the option, or if we offer the option to be able to do any type of synchronous learning. One of our challenges is a technology issue to be able to simultaneously stream from every one of our rooms. So Dr. Sosnovic, I know, is working on some potential solutions for that, but I don't know if we know that that will be prepared before school starts. Do you want to add to that?
Yes. In essence, we are restricted right now with the amount of bandwidth that is coming to us in terms of our internet service provider. And so we are looking to update that. We are working with Penn Teledata and the CLIU to get the necessary items in place that will give us the capacity to allow us to stream live Zoom sessions from all of our classrooms simultaneously. If we would try that right now, we would not be able to successfully do so because of the constraints of internet bandwidth. So we had some testing done this week that looks very favorable, and we are trying to organize and align the resources that I mentioned before to get it in place for the start of school.
So Mrs. Fenstermacher, that could mean that in a remote model, the teachers are here and have access to their supplies, or it could mean that they instruct from home like they did in the spring. But in either case, we will be making revisions to the expectations grading as well as the time schedule at every level.
Thank you, Mrs. Fenstermaker, for your comments. And Dr. Sosnovic, are there any other?
Oh, I wasn't finished. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, excuse me. I've seen other districts purchase programs and software specifically designed for virtual learning. Has Northwestern purchased additional programs and softwares for their curriculum to be utilized in the fall as opposed to spring?
The three models that we used in the spring, one is designed and other districts have moved to it, which is Canvas, which is one of our models that we already purchased, and we did have it in the spring. It is a program and a platform that the majority of our middle school and secondary students and teachers utilize. At the elementary, they have previously, and I believe will continue to utilize either Google Classroom or Seesaw as the model. But we do have that software. It is called Canvas, and most other districts utilize either that or Schoolology. For the most part, we only utilize that at secondary. We did, however, purchase Seesaw for our very young elementary grades and had good feedback in the spring that was easier for parents to navigate as well as students to navigate than Google Classroom was.
Okay, and my last question. I realize that teachers are off in the summer. How have teachers been trained and prepped if we do go virtual in the fall?
Mrs. Stitzel, I believe you're on. Would you like to talk about some of the professional development that we offer to our staff this summer in terms of digital learning? I think she's on.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. There are a number of teachers that actually have spent 2 of their trade days that they have. Most of them actually have spent their trade days this summer looking at what they have done in the past, over this past spring, and trying to develop ways that would make it a little bit more robust for next year in case they had to quickly move to that scenario again. Also, we have spent quite a bit of time and energy trying to get our teachers to take different types of online training courses. Some of those were offered through the Bureau of Educational Research, et cetera, to help them become better online instructors. So a majority of our teachers have taken advantage of at least one of those options.
And I will point out, for some time, we've had in place a technology integrator that's been working with our teachers for years in terms of leveraging technology and integrating technology to support classroom and online instruction. So, building upon the skills that we've already established in terms of professional development throughout the years, we're looking to offer the things that Mrs. Stitzel mentioned, as well as continue to reinforce new best practices as they come apparent as everybody's moving into this model.
Thank you, Mrs. Fenstermaker. Dr. Sosnovic, are there any other people in the queue?
Yes, sir. I have David Brannon. Mr. Brannon, I unmuted you. David, are you still there?
Mr. Brennan, you might have yourself muted on your Zoom.
I'll prompt him to unmute.
Okay, here, we got you now?
Yep,
Yeah,
we
we
can
got
hear
you
you now.
Okay, sorry about that. So Dave Brandon, Ponderosa, Cortland Township. I see Tom Wolf announced that U.S. Department of Education has approved the Pennsylvania application for $523.8 million in one-time federal emergency funds to help schools respond to COVID-19 impact. My question is, do we know how much of that $524 million Northwestern will get, and how that will affect property tax increases?
Well, I will answer the first part, and I'm actually going to ask Mrs. Stitzel if she could pull her notes up, because she's actually the one who has probably the grant information in front of her without Mrs. Frisbee here. But yes, we do. We, on the last school board meeting, agenda approved application for two parts of federal funds, one of which is CARES related. It is 240-ish, and Mrs. Stitzel can tell me the exact amount. And then there is another piece that is a little over 100,000. They are in two pieces. There is, Dave, about $50 million that PDE is not dispersing right now. So we anticipate there will be a third wave of funding that we will have to apply for. As with anything coming through PDE in a grant process, there was a limited list of things that we had to apply for. And so, for example, the one grant you could use for anything expending all the way back to March in PPE gear and anything COVID related and any kind of digital professional development or digital education. However, the other grant is pretty interesting because you actually have to have the funds expended before October. And so part of our challenge was thinking of things that were not full year things, that were things that we might need to get in for the beginning of school, but things that were not full year things, like, tuition in the digital academy, for example. So Mrs. Stitzel probably has a better idea of the ideas and of the particular categories we applied for, and actually might have it in front of her, maybe. Sorry,
I just quickly was able to pull up the grant sheets that we had. So I don't have specifics. However, I do have that the ESSER CARES grant that we received is up to 140,000 and change. And then the PCCD grant is about 268,000 or so. But yes, we actually are taking a look at using some of the ESSER grant for some things like purchasing the Seesaw, which is a online program to help communication between our children in the elementary school and the teachers as well. So that is one thing that Mrs. Holman had mentioned earlier in answer to another question. We are also taking a look at purchasing some additional things regarding our digital academy for parents who would like to go that route. So those are a few things that we are taking a look at purchasing through the ESSER CARE grants.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. Dr. Sosnovic, anybody else?
Yes, I have April Huffman. Ms. Huffman, you are able to talk.
Hi, I just have two, sorry, about my picture. I just had two quick questions. One is when the kids are sitting at their desks, and are they going to be able to social distance enough that they can have their masks off while in the classroom at the high school and middle school level? And two is, I know there's a limited number of days that the kids are allowed to be absent. If they're supposed to stay home with every little symptom they have, how is that going to impact their ability, to move on to the next level if they're missing tons of school?
The first question is, it depends. It depends on several things. The answer is we obviously are required to provide masks and require masks of all students if they are not able to socially distance at least 6 feet. There are classrooms of ours that I would tell you they are no less than the 3 feet rule, but they are not 6 feet. There are classrooms that we do have that are 6 feet from one another. It depends on the class enrollment as well as the survey results. And so the natural decision-making is as parents choose an online model of our digital academy, an online model with Northwestern teachers and/or a hybrid model. If we are able to offer multiple models, it obviously decreases the number of students that is in any given classroom and gives us the ability to space them out further. But the answer is it really depends on the class, the enrollment in the class, and the size of the class. I know all of our principals have gone through each of our spaces, have removed additional furniture that might not be necessary, have looked at the largest class size that are in each of the spaces, and in some cases have made moves to larger spaces to compensate for the number of students that are in those spaces. Your second one is the absence symptoms. Yes, obviously we are, for at least the next school year, asking you to be very strict with your children. And the symptoms are on the card, and so it's easier in that the symptoms on the left side of the card are obviously the ones that are more associated with COVID, in that we are only requiring one, but the right side of the card is you would need 2 symptoms to stay home, and that's the way that the symptom card works. We have not received any updated information from PD in terms of attendance, so that the wonderful letters that you get and the requirements that require doctor's excuses, although they are a school rule that we implement, it's really driven by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and a basic education circular that says we need to send letters after so many absences, and we need to require doctor's excuses after so many absences. They are obviously encouraging the same procedures for sickness this year, but to date, they have not updated any attendance requirements that will allow us to probably not send those letters. That being said, I know each of our building principals will be reasonable in terms of the approach to students being absent for health-related issues more this year than any other year, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get the letters.
Mrs. Holman, I'd like to also add with regard to the first item, our intention is to establish, creative solutions as much as possible to allow students to remove their face mask during the day while maintaining that 6-foot rule. So we're thinking through as a leadership team, as well as we will be engaging our conversations with our teachers to see what we could do to embed purposeful times where, they could get those mask breaks, throughout the day.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman. Dr. Sosnovic, anybody else in the queue?
No, sir.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight and for the questions that you asked and for further clarification. And at this time on the agenda, we'll move into 3.02 meeting announcements. We will have an executive session for personnel immediately following this meeting tonight. And the next board meeting will be August 5th at 7 p.m., followed by an executive session for personnel. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion, Rex.
Motion by Mr. Rex.
Second, Pazinski.
Second by Mrs. Pazinski. Meeting adjourned.